Hi, everyone. Buenas tardes. Good afternoon. My name is Analucia Lopezrevoredo, and I'm the proud founder and executive director of Jewtina Y Co, which is a Latin and Jewish organization on a mission to nurture Latin Jewish community, identity, leadership, and resiliency. And part of the love that we have for our community is really just celebrating the multi-heritage and the multicultural nature of who we are as Latin Jews. And so today, I'm especially excited because I'll get to show you two special ways. I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about how Jews in Latin America spice things up during Hanukkah season. And so I'm really excited because these two things are things that are very important to me as someone who is Latina, who was born in Lima, Peru, in South America, and whose grandparents are from Chile, and who has a very strong tie to really the indigenous community of Latin America as well. And so without any further ado, we're going to get started. So as Trillian showed us at the beginning of the call, Latin America, you've all seen your little globes. You've got an opportunity to see that it starts with Mexico and it ends all the way to the tip of Argentina and Chile. Also part of Latin America is the Caribbean, and certainly like the Jewish communities of the Caribbean have played an instrumental role in not just our culture today, but also the food we're going to eat today. So Latin America, for those that don't know, is home to the third largest Jewish diaspora in the world. So collectively, okay? And we say diaspora because the largest diaspora would be North America, the second largest diaspora being Europe, and the third largest diaspora being Latin America. And so Jewish Latin American history dates back longer than most people imagine. So in the 16th century, when the Spanish and the Portuguese Inquisitions were taking place, many Jews fled their homes and were either forced to convert or fled their homes. And a lot of the people who were recent converts moved to Latin America with a desire to be farther away from the Inquisition. Now, while there were Jews that were starting to populate Latin America at that time, Jewish life wasn't something that was bustling. And so it's important to know that it wasn't until really the mid-19th century when much more European migration from France, Germany, and Russia started to make its way to Latin America that we saw really the communities that you see today in Latin America. And so that's a big piece of the puzzle with a couple of other sprinkled pieces in between. So we're going to be doing a lot of talking about history and also doing some cooking, but I'm going to go straight into our first cooking piece. So latkes. Many of you know latkes as being these delicious potato pancakes that we get to devour without counting how many we eat during Hanukkah. And in Latin America, we also eat potatoes because if you didn't already know, the humble potato actually comes from South America. It comes from the Andes. Around 8,000 years ago, about 8,000 years ago is when the potato originated. And when the conquistadores came to Latin America and they discovered the potato, that's when they started to export it to Europe. So it doesn't come from Europe. It doesn't come from Ireland, despite all of us knowing about the potato famines and us thinking about latke from there. So it's actually, when we think about latkes in Latin America, it's like returning home. And in the Andes, we have over 5,000 different types of potato varieties, which is incredible and quite colorful if you've got the chance to explore them and taste them. And so the potato, we obviously enjoy the potato in Latin America, and many of us love making potato latkes, but we've also had the opportunity to experiment with other starchy things that we also enjoy on a daily basis. And so two of the things that I'm going to talk about today are the plantain, which is a much larger, it looks like a banana, and they're in the same family, but this is the slightly older, bigger cousin that is very versatile. And so the plantain it's an important, beautiful history because the plantain is actually not native to Latin America. Plantains came in the 15th century as a result of Portuguese slaveholders having a lot of pull in Western Africa. And so when they were starting to bring enslaved people to Latin America, they also brought the plantain because the plantain was cheap, it was starchy, it was nutritious, and it was a great way in which to feed a lot of people with not a lot of money. So it's interesting because it has a very complex history. But today, the plantain is seen so integral to the history of the people of Latin America, specifically folks who have a history of whose ancestors were enslaved people. And it's seen as kind of like a resistance food, that now we eat it with a desire to reclaim the origins of the food. And we get to, and it's so ingrained in so many of the different dishes that we eat already. So whether we eat them as fritters, as we eat them as something called patacones when we make a green plantain, or if we eat maduros, which is that if you've ever had them, the sweet tasting plantain when they're really made, when they're nice and brown, something like this. This would yield a very sweet taste. This yields a much more starchy taste, similar to a regular banana, like what you would expect. So we're going to start with doing a plantain latke. And so what I've done is I've already peeled the latke, and we peeled the latke and we grated the latke. And the whole purpose of that is the latkes are honestly, or the plantain is a quite versatile food. And so it actually is quite easy to grate, but a lot of people also love to put it in a food processor because it mixes everything together a lot easier. But we went a little bit old school style today. And so we grated the plantain, which came out with a little bit of a looking mush like this. It's much mushier than you would expect a potato to look like, but it's going to yield the same beautiful results. Okay. And so what we do is we have, for this recipe, we're going to be using 2 plantains. So we peeled 2 plantains, we grated the plantains, and then the next ingredient is the onion. And so for this, we're going to use half a small yellow onion, which is around this size, a yellow onion, a small onion, or a quarter of a large yellow onion. This is just for a little bit of flavor, not meant to be overpowering. So this is why we only say a quarter. And so we're going to mix the onion that I've already pre-peeled and grated. And we're going to mix together the plantain and the onion. And the onion also really helps with the sticking together to make the type of patty that we want to make for the latke. And so the next piece is, I also have my dear friend Tamara, who's going to be frying for us in the background. So if you see her, that's what she's going to say. Hi, Tamara. So she's going to be heating up the oil so that we can make it nice and hot. For frying, we recommend that you use grapeseed oil, or that you use something like canola oil. Even coconut oil is great. Stay away from something like olive oil, because as healthy as we might think it is, when you're burning it at high heat, which you're going to need for these plantains, it can be quite terrible for you, because it evaporates really quickly and becomes very, very toxic. So stay away from that. Go with grapeseed, go with canola, go with coconut, or even go with avocado, which is a wonderful high heat frying oil. So then the next piece now that we've mixed in the plantain and the onion, is that we're going to go ahead and add a number of the other ingredients. And so the other pieces of the ingredients are 2 grated garlic, so chopped and grated. So here's I already had peeled my garlic, and then I chopped it. So I'm going to add that in there. And I'm also going to add 2 eggs. The eggs, of course, are everything is a magical ingredient, and when it comes together, it surely comes together. The egg is something that allows us to congeal. Okay, so without it, we really can't. It wouldn't stick together. And then the last thing that we're going to add is potato flour. Now, the reason why I decided to use potato flour in our recipe is because it has bringing it back together to that latke flavor, the roots of the latke. You can, of course, use other types of flour if you prefer to use wheat flour. We typically make it like this way so that if anyone has any gluten allergies, we know that people can eat it, and there is no worry of like, oh shoot, I made these delicious latkes, but I can't feed them to you because they've got gluten, which happens all the time. I'm also gluten-free, so it's partially a thing for myself so that I can eat them. And then another piece that we add here is, it's up to us how much, a little bit of salt and pepper at the beginning. We can sprinkle that in. And then of course, a bit of the cayenne pepper, or the paprika. And it's really just meant, paprika does a beautiful job of bringing out some of the plantain flavors. And so we have some powdered paprika, and we're just going to put about Just the recipe that we use calls for half a teaspoon. We kind of just sprinkle it in based for a little bit of color as well. And with this, we're going to then go ahead and mix these beautiful batter. Here it is, mixing it, yummy. And we're going ahead, and you see it, the plantain batter is going to look a lot more like pancake batter because of, again, that plantain having a lot more of that mushier feel. The trick here is to not over mush, because if you get over mushy, then it kind of takes away from that coarseness that looks a little bit more latke-y. So, I mean, it's up to you. If you want to go ahead and keep going a lot harder, just be prepared that that's what it's going to look like. And, you know, it's totally up to you. It's all about your preference, so no worries. So I'm going to give this to Tamra, who's going to go ahead, and the oil, the grapeseed oil, is heating up at about 360 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's pretty high. Again, be careful. Definitely recommend that if this is something that's so much fun to make with kids, but if you're making it with kids, that you of course make sure that they stay safe, that we're using like perhaps a longer sleeve shirt, because it's very possible that it can get onto your arms. And no, that's not fun for anyone. So let's make sure that people are safe. And that everyone gets to enjoy this, because this is one of the fun pieces. So the reason why we wanted to use the plantain as a beautiful example of how we enjoy like old Jewish flavors in the new world style is because, as I was mentioning earlier, in Latin America, the plantain has this history that is not always a beautiful history as we think as to why it was brought to the Americas, right? It was brought out of convenience. It was brought out of a way to dehumanize people and feed them something that wasn't worth a lot of money, and that was something that they knew that they were going to eat because it came from their old land. And so from Western Africa, where a lot of people were being brought, were meeting and were being brought into Latin America as enslaved folks. And so it's kind of become beautiful to see how eating plantains is not just part of our history, but it's part of an opportunity for us to also tell the complicated history of Latin America. It's not all fun and games and being part of this beautiful community with beautiful music and incredible cultures. There's also this history of conquer, there's this history of enslavement. And when we are eating plantains and plantain latkes, it's a beautiful opportunity to be able to bring that in and to bring nuance, because it's all part of the greater story. Now, going back to Latin America, I mentioned a little bit earlier that Jews in Latin America really started to populate a Jewish community in the mid-19th century. So it's incredible because before that, even though we were talking about this community being the ones who primarily populated Jewish Latin America today, we also had a number of other Jewish migrants that came to Latin America. We had a number of Moroccan Jewish migrants who came during something called the rubber boom, in which in the Amazon, there was such a heightened movement for work. And so a lot of primarily men, because they were the ones doing that kind of heavy lifting outdoor work, came to Latin America and established themselves in communities. And many of them intermarried with the local community members. And so there was a long time of kind of a disassociation from Jewish culture. But in the 20th century, there's been this revival, this desire for communities throughout the Amazon, where a lot of these older North African communities had semi-established themselves to reclaim their Jewish identity, which is a pretty amazing phenomenon, because they're not necessarily linked to the main Jewish communities that have a larger organizing capacity, but they still have this desire to be able to do it in person. So super exciting to be able to have that. And the plantains, they're generally take about like 2 to 3 minutes on each side. So definitely make sure that you're checking it, that you're using a spatula to be able to see that they're cooking okay. We're using a nonstick pan, but we're also using the grapeseed oil to fry. One thing that I would stray away from sometimes is a cast iron, because as much as we love cast irons to cook with, when you're making something like a pancake or a latke, it can get really sticky and not allow you to have that coarse. It's gonna kind of split up in half, and it's not gonna be fun for you. It's not gonna be fun for anyone. So save yourself that trouble. Now, going back to Latin America. So today, I don't know if people here know, but the largest Latin American, or the largest Jewish community in Latin America is, can anybody guess? Maybe you're screaming it out loud and you have yourself not unmuted. So I'm going to imagine that you are saying Argentina. And if you're saying Argentina, then you got it 100% right. Okay, so Argentina is home to the largest Latin American Jewish community in Central America and South America collectively, okay? So throughout, if you combine all of the Latin American communities, we have roughly around 300,000 Jews living in Latin America. Argentina accounts for about 241,000 of that entire population. So that's a lot. And what's pretty special is that when you go to Argentina, you have so much opportunity to experience Jewish life in so many different capacities. I would say that the majority of, there's obviously communities that are much more observant and communities that are atheist but are largely Zionist or just really involved and really desiring to maintain Jewish culture, which is really special in terms of, in my own experience being Peruvian, we have a population of close to 2,000 Jews in Lima, which is where I'm from, the capital of Peru. And when you have something so tiny, like 2,000 people, most people are kind of doing the same thing because you're wanting to preserve something, and whether or not you're on one extreme or the other, you're not really going to defy that as much. In Argentina, giving 241,000 people, like, my goodness, you have so much room to play around with. And so for me, as a Jew from Latin America, it's amazing to travel to different Latin American countries and be able to experience just how diverse it actually is in different places. And so for those who are interested, Argentina does have the largest Jewish community in Latin America, and that's followed by Brazil and Mexico and Uruguay and Chile, which is where my grandparents originated from, where they came from before they went to Peru. And so the next piece that I'm going to go ahead and do, Cameron, how are we doing with our plantain latkes?
We have a couple that are done already.
They look amazing. I'm actually going to move this real quick and see if we can. Wow. Can we get an amen? How beautiful they look? Amen. Yes, I think so too. Thank you so much. And again, making sure that we're not meshing them too much allows it to have that little bit of a coarse look. Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Tam. A lot of people are always blown away when we make plantain latkes, and they were just like, whoa, like, this is not what I was expecting. But it's like, well, why not? You know, I think we sometimes have this notion of what Jewish food is. But for me, being someone who survived, who's been in the diaspora in for so many different generations in a lot of different places, I can say that Jewish food is whatever food is made with love, with intention, and made with a desire to nourish, and to typically do so in a contained ritual context, whether it's Shabbat, whether it's Pesach, whether it's any holiday that allows us to come together and rejoice and remember that we're part of a community that is much larger than any particular community that we're in at any point in time. So certainly want to be able to share that back with you all, because sometimes when people say, oh, you know, this is what Jewish food looks like, it's important to kind of push back a little and say, huh, interesting, because I can guarantee, having traveled to many Jewish communities around the world, the Jewish food in India, in Mumbai, looks very different than Jewish food in Cochin, India. Okay, so we're talking the same country. Than it looks in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. Then it looks in Bogotá, Colombia. Then it looks in La Habana, Cuba. So certainly, like, this is an opportunity for us to be stretched, because wherever it is that you are, you're going to find something unique and different. Now, we're going to do another latke, and this time it's going to be another one. This one's probably one of my favorites. It is called a yuca latke. So yuca, also known as cassava or known as yuca, those are the main two names, is a root vegetable that originated in South America. And some people describe it as like nutty in flavor, or that it's similar to taro. I don't know if anyone here has had taro. or a sweet potato, certainly similar to a potato, and it's got that starchy, carby nourishment that a lot of people in the Andes and a lot of people in the jungle, because the yucca does originate in the jungle, are living off of. Like, this is how people get the majority of their nourishment. And so again, whenever we make yucca latkes, or even sweet potato latkes or potato latkes in Latin America, it's a beautiful ode to how these foods that have grown from our land nourish so many people in our community. And so I also just love yucca latkes because yucca, for those who have been able to travel in more tropical areas around the world, but specifically in Latin America, particularly some of my favorite is in Cuba, they make amazing fried yucca, which they cut it up, and it's hard to cut. So they cut it up and they make it into these like long, almost like an oversized French fry, like oversized, and they deep fry it. And it's honestly the most delicious deep fried thing that's ever been made. And so given how much I love yucca, we were like, okay, let's make a recipe for yucca latkes, because this is, again, another opportunity to get people excited about something that comes from South America, something that's so easy to bring in during Hanukkah season. And whenever it is that we're hosting Hanukkah parties, it's great to be able to say, here's a yucca latke, and here's a sweet potato latke, and a plantain latke. And this is the way in which we get creative in Latin America as Jews. And so similar to the plantain latke, the yucca latke, it follows a very similar flow. It has a lot of the same ingredients, with the exception of we also add a potato to kind of make it a little bit easier to kind of come together. So I'll say, as I mentioned earlier, yuccas can be really, really tough to find. They can be tough depending on like where it is that you live, but they can be very, very difficult to grate because they are peeling. Typically we peel the yucca, and just peeling takes time. So by the time you're done with peeling it, you're like, oh my goodness, what's the next piece? And it's grating them. So this is when a food processor is really helpful. Something else that I really like as well is a Vitamix. If you chop it up into a lot of little pieces and you have that, you can honestly just move a lot of things around, and it's great. Yucca, unlike the plantain, because the plantain's already mushy and there's no real way for you to kind of extract that moisture, yucca and potatoes are a lot more similar. And so when you do cut and you grate them, I think it's always great to have a little paper towel to kind of soak out a lot of the excess water that comes from there. And it's always nice. I always do it for like a little bit. If there's a little bit of sun coming into my window, I just have it lay out for a couple of seconds, so that way, for a couple of minutes, so that way it also kind of gets some dry experience, which is interesting because in the Andean communities of Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia, this is how people preserve a lot of potato, is they cut it and they lay it out in the sun to preserve and to dry and to use for future iterations, which is, it kind of brings me back to my roots to be able to say I'm also kind of doing something similar. So here we are, grated the yucca and also added a little bit of the potato. So if you look at the ingredients, it calls for 3 medium-sized yuccas and a Yukon potato. And so when we mix those things together, similar to the last recipe, we're also going to add half a small onion or a quarter of a big onion. So it was great for us because we were able to just use a number of onions and split it all up between these two delicious flavors. And then I'm going to add all the other ingredients as well. So we're putting in 2 eggs. We're going to put in 2 garlic cloves that are chopped. I'm going to show you so far what we got so you're not feeling like you're missing out, because I know sometimes when you can't see, there it is. Similarly, we're going to go ahead and sprinkle some salt. And it depends really to your taste. I'm someone who's very sensitive to salt. My partner, he loves salt. And so we kind of have to make an agreement that like we pre-salt it, but then afterwards people kind of really get to do the saltiness, because you don't want to over salt, and then you can't, if you've already cooked over salted, there's nothing you can do about it. If you've under salted, you can always salt at the end. Besides, I always think it's nice to add more salt after something is fried. There's just something really good about it. The new salt sticking to the fried food, like, hello. So we also added some paprika, and we're mixing this up. And the last ingredient, the flour. Again, I'm using potato flour with this. For the yuca, we've also tested it with cassava flour, which is a wonderful alternative. Other great gluten-free alternative flours, you have like all-purpose flour. You can also use sweet potato flour. These do exist, and it all depends. Some people really have different reasons why they experiment. The one flour that's a little weird for me for this kind of cooking is almond flour, just because sometimes there's something, for me at least, whenever I'm cooking with almond flour in a context that's not sweet, it doesn't land right. It doesn't cook correctly. And so another great one is cornstarch. I would say experiment with a couple of different things, because there's a lot of ways in which to do something. And I know and I mentioned earlier, if you've got regular flour, you can also use that as well. So I'm going to hand these over to my incredible helper, Tamara. Thank you. Where are those other? Yes, can you bring those up? Thank you, Tam. Okay, so as Tamara is doing sister work and helping me fry those, we've got these beautiful plantain latkes to look at and enjoy. Take a picture, it lasts longer, so people say. And I always get so excited when I see these completed, because it's so easy to mix things up, and it's so easy to be able to tell a story. There's something that I'm really passionate about that we always try to bring out in our recipes at Jewtina Y Co, which is a concept called Gastro Diplomacy, which is the idea of using food as an opportunity to bridge cultures, to bridge experiences, and to really highlight at times the differences and the uniqueness and the similarities that a lot of cultures have with one another. And so I love making plantain latkes with people who are coming from different parts of the world, because plantains grow all over the world. As I mentioned, plantains are not native to Latin America, even though they are a staple food there now for so many communities. It's debated whether it originated in Africa or in South Asia, but we know that the crop came to Latin America via West Africa. And it's just a nice way to be able to say, like, we're tying so many parts of the world with this like one food. And during the Festival of Lights, which is about bringing light and really allowing ourselves to see where it is that light lives within us and where it is that we need light to come in. I think one of the most beautiful ways in which we do that is around community and building relationships and being able to highlight so many things that we're here to celebrate, and we're here to commemorate as things that unite us during this season. And so here's again the beautiful plantain latke. Now, one thing that we're not going to do today for the demo, but that I always say is probably one of the most important pieces to any type of latke experience is the sauce. Okay, so sauces are another beautiful way in which to commemorate a lot of different communities. In the United States, which is where I primarily grew up, latkes were typically enjoyed with applesauce or sour cream. And don't get me wrong, I love sour cream and applesauce on my latkes. Like, there's never anything that's going to get in the way of me making one of those. But other sauces that I really love, especially coming from Peru, we love spicy food. We've got a lot of peppers. Our peppers, we call them ají, kind of like brother in Hebrew, ají. People always think I'm saying that, right? Ají and ají. And in Mexico, they call it chile, okay, or like chili. And so, spicy food is such a big part of Latin America. And I think it's a really great way in which to commemorate our communities by serving a wide range of sauces, and also giving people who are coming to your table from different communities a nice way to honor them. And you know that they're coming from a certain community that likes a certain type of flavor. Why not also be able to bring that in and honor them in that process? So I highly recommend, get creative. You can always change it up every year. Don't be afraid of doing something that's new, because it's easy to try something on. It's not going to ruin the flow. so much about, I think, being part of an active Jewish community is creating new experiences. I always say, as a Jew, I'm not just here to consume Judaism, I'm also here to co-create it. And we get to co-create it every day, every holiday season with our community members, with all of you. So I'm really excited to hear what it is that folks do with these recipes and what sauces are inspire them to enjoy them even more so. So let's go ahead and check in with Tam. How are we doing over here with the Jewtina Y Co? They look beautiful. Let's take a little peek.
They're starting to crisp.
They look beautiful. Amazing, amazing.
I made these ones thinner, so I think these will cook really well.
Great. And it's also super up to you. I'm the kind of person that if I ever order French fries, I say, can you make sure they're really crispy? Because I like them really crispy. So again, like this is, some people like their latkes more like hash browns. No, I like them crispy. I like them. There's just something really, again, fried oil and salt. Like you can't, what gets better than that? Like, let's be honest. This is not a time to be holding back, thinking about, you know, whether your pants are going to fit. It's the holidays. Enjoy, rejoice. We're about cycles. Like, come on. So with that, I would love to, I'd love to kind of try one of these because I think it's only fair that if we're making these, that one of us tries them. And I guess that's going to be me right now. And to give you a little bit of some insight, a little report. So, excuse me. This is the plantain. Amazing, 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 amazing. And for those that are having traveled throughout Colombia or throughout Venezuela, you might try the plantain latke and say, wow, it's a lot like, it reminds me of something. And it does. It reminds us often of patacones, which are plantains that are in the raw and then are just mashed and are fried. So this just gives it a little bit more flavor. It gives it a little bit more of that Hanukkah season. They're very similar. And so if you have people that are coming from different places, you're likely to have some folks who recognize it from something unique. Also similar, we have this a lot in Indonesia, in the Philippines. So again, what an opportunity to bring people together and associate it with something that they feel is most homey to them. Well, I think we are done with these yucalatas back here. One last tips I'll give, a couple of more tips I'll give. Are there sous chef? Abraham. Hi, Abraham. Di hola. Hola. He's a little shy. Something I always love to do when it comes to other things that I love to recommend is we want to make them a little bit more, put in a little bit more veg. For the yucalatas, sometimes I'll grate in some zucchini or I'll grate in some carrots just to add a little bit more color or to add a little bit more nutrition value. Another thing is when I was talking about in Peru, we've got over 5,000 varieties of potatoes. Indeed, we've even got a lot of purple potatoes. And so it's beautiful to also see how purple potatoes come out. And that's more of that traditional. It tastes the exact same. It is more nutrient dense because of its color. And again, it's just like a nice way to play around with different ways in which the potato or starchy foods can show up during Hanukkah. So with that, I think we are at time, sadly. I wish all of you were here with us so that we could enjoy them, because what's going to happen now is that we're going to enjoy them. And it's not quite the holiday season yet, and we need to make room for Thanksgiving. So bless us, wish us luck. And thank you so much to everyone who is here participating, who is interested. Again, Jewtina Y Co is an organization, it's a Latin Jewish organization on a mission to nurture Latin Jewish community, identity, leadership, and resiliency. We've got incredible resources, and it's not just for Latin Jews, it's for a lot of people, a lot of members of our community are non-Latin Jewish people who are interested in learning about our community's uniqueness and amazing celebratory practices. And we've also a lot of Latinos who are not Jewish who are learning about their cousins, their Latin Jewish cousins, who we share a lot of the same similar cultural priorities and values, but have a little bit of different twist to the way we see life. And so we invite anyone to check out our recipe section if you're interested in learning more about the different Jewish communities in Latin America. We have a ton of virtual travel videos that are available to you. And we've got a beautiful podcast that lift up a lot of different diverse Latin Jewish voices. So head to our website, enjoy what we got. We're building community together. Remember, And until next time, muchas gracias.